caregivers are always adapting to the changes that are occurring, and we always have that goal of thriving together with our loved ones and those that we care for. So this week we've been bringing you daily opportunities to learn, adapt, and thrive, and we hope that you will carry those through once this conference has finished. The Northern Virginia Dementia Care Consortium Caregivers Conference is organized each year by a committee of volunteer professionals that represent our dementia community in Northern Virginia. And you can see these organizations listed here on the screen. You can also learn more about them in the virtual exhibit hall. So we do encourage you to go on over there and check out some of our consortium organizers. And again, thanks to Steve Gurney of Positive Aging Sourcebook for being our tech guru and making all of this happen behind the scenes. We are grateful to our conference sponsors for making this event possible for caregivers across Northern Virginia and on this virtual platform, even beyond. Today's conference sponsor is Graceful Care. So now let's hear a few words from Dan Flavin, President of Graceful Care. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you very much. Hello, conference goers. Happy Friday. What a great conference this has been. Congratulations to everyone who worked so hard to make it the great conference that it is. I'm Dan Flavin, CEO and owner of Graceful Care, and I'm here with our founder and greatest grandmother ever, Pat Williams. People ask me, what's special about Graceful Care? And I think I've thought about that a lot. And we have several of our what used to be caregivers that we've known, people we've known for a very long time. And then we asked them to be caregivers and they were caregivers. And then they've gone along, we've been around for such a long time that they needed care. And they came to us to trust us to care for them or for their loved ones. And we thought, wow, I think that's special. And I think that says a lot about us. So we've been supporting this conference for a very, very long time, decades. And we're so excited for 2021 where we can be in person again and see you guys again. So thank you. Thank you for everything you guys do and for all your great caregiving. And we'll see you in 2021.
Thank you. Do we have a short video for Graceful Care?
Did you want me to play that? I think what you said was
okay. Okay. So moving on to housekeeping, I'd like to share just a few pieces of information to address some frequently asked questions. Today is the last day of our conference. We have recorded all of our sessions. So if you missed a day, maybe you only learned about the conference within the last couple of days, all of the recordings are posted at nvdcc.com on the conference schedule page, which will be dropping into the chat now. You can also find the handouts for each day's session on that same website. And for professional attendees wishing to apply for 1 CEU credit, professionals must attend all conference sessions, and the link to access the CEU will be provided at the end of today's session. Beyond education, one of the most valuable aspects of this conference is our exhibit hall, which is now in a virtual format. So one of the great things about the virtual exhibit hall is you can visit 24/7 from the comfort of your home or office. So we do encourage you to click around. There are over 40 great resources here on the screen. Find these in your virtual exhibit hall, learn a bit about some of the resources and supports right here in your own backyard in Northern Virginia. And now, Pat, welcome. Can you introduce today's session and speaker?
I'm happy to. Today's session is the presence of mind to grow with the flow, making the most of every situation. Our speaker is Ron Culberson. Ron began his career by working with people at the end of their lives as a home care social worker at Hospice of Northern Virginia, which is now Capital Caring Health. After several years, Ron became manager of counseling services and eventually director of quality service. Ron has authored 4 books. Here's one of them. And he's past president of the National Speakers Association. This year, Ron went back to school and became a certified EMT. And he serves his local community through Wintergreen Fire and Rescue. Ron has been a speaker at our conference many times, and we keep calling him back for more. It's always a joy to have you with us, Ron. Let's give him a welcome and get ready to smile. It's Ron Culberson.
Thank you so much, Pat. Hello, everybody. It's great to see you. Well, I can't really see you, but I'm assuming you're all out there somewhere. I'm not sure, but I'm so glad to be here. This virtual world is crazy. I know it's we call it pivoting, which means we just adjust as the situation changes. So I just want to thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, but also to just appreciate the fact that we are, we're in a situation that's unlike anything we've ever been through, and so that just adds to all the value, I believe, of what we're going through with this conference, because I think it's really it's been great. I want to start off and just share a quick scenario with you that I think captures a lot of how we deal with things in our life. I worked at Hospice of Northern Virginia, which is now Capital Caring, and I was a home care social worker when I first went there. And I loved that work. I know that many of you that are professional caregivers, you find that you get much more out of it than you ever give. And I certainly felt that way about hospice care. But on one particular, when I worked there, we covered all of Northern Virginia. And any of you that know Northern Virginia, you know that places like Arlington, which are some of the older neighborhoods, the streets are kind of wacky. Sometimes you couldn't find your way to different places because you go down one street and it would just stop and you'd have to figure out where it picked up again. Well, we had a system that really helped with that. Our admitting nurse would go out to admit a new patient into our program, and she would write down the directions from our office to the home, and she'd bring that back and give it to our team assistant, who would then compare it to a map to make sure that when they put it in the system, we had the ability to know where we were going, and it was in our computer system there. So we'd print out a little sheet that had all the information on it, and at the bottom it had directions to the home. So I was on one home care visit. I went over to Vienna. I was visiting this patient over in Vienna, and the directions were wrong. I did not know they were wrong. And it said on this one particular street to take the second left, but I should have taken the third left. And so I took the second left, and then I did what I always do to figure out if I'm on the right street. I look at the house numbers. And if the house numbers match what I'm looking for, going in the same sequence, then I know I'm on the right street. Well, it turns out on this particular area of Vienna, all the parallel streets had the same house numbers, but different street names. So I am on the wrong street, going to the wrong house, thinking I'm on the right street. So I pull up to the house with the number that I'm looking for, and I walked up to the door and I knocked on the door, and a lovely woman came to the door, and I said, "Hi, I'm your hospice social worker." And this woman took a step back and said, "I've got a cold, but I'm not that sick." And I was so grateful for her because she got me out of a very awkward, embarrassing situation. And to me, this is the essence of life. This is nirvana for me. This is where we go into a situation, and regardless of what the outcome is, we have the ability to roll with it. And that woman just demonstrated something I thought was brilliant. Now, I am a speaker, I'm an author, and I also call myself a humorist. You may not call me that after today, but that's okay. So I tend to look at things a little bit differently, a little bit skewed. My way of looking at things is that I just kind of turn slightly to the side and see if I can see the situation from a different perspective. So what I'd like to do to start this session off is to do what I've done many years at this conference, is to give you a quick recap of what we've seen so far. I just want to take perhaps a poignant but also lighthearted look at the conference thus far. And so I have my notes here. I'm going to be reading most of this since I would never remember any of this with this brain that I have. So it's been an amazing conference. I think many of you who have been to it all week know how great it's been, great sessions, great information. And first of all, I just want to address the conference theme. It's really about improving and adapting as we deal with the challenges of dementia care. So they've picked the theme, grow with the flow, right? And I think for those of us that are older, we would also have been interested in learning how to improve the flow when we go. But maybe I digress. I don't know. Perhaps that's just me. So let's talk about day one. Day one was fantastic. Robin and Becca talked about technology that can help us. Now, I think this was brilliant because there's so many little subtleties and so many little techniques that you can use with technology that I didn't know all of them, and I think we learned a lot about that. And the first thing they did was to tell us, or define rather, as they said, define frequently used words that we use when using technology. The one they didn't cover was this one. Am I alone, or do other people have that reaction when they deal with technology? As an aside, I did a webinar yesterday and I tested everything multiple times. And when I started the webinar, my video froze. I still to this day, I don't know how. I don't know how it froze or why, but that's technology. They also talked about smart devices that are voice activated so that we don't have to get up and get around and move them. They're voice activated. Now, I just want to say, after our recent election, I've determined that politicians are actually voice aggravated. One side says something and the other gets mad. Do I hear an amen on that? That's the way the system works, right? Unfortunately. They then showed us how Alexa can be used for self-care, using meditation and music, doing daily gratitude sort of reviews, emergency care. The Ask My Buddy program was fantastic, where you could actually tell it to call 911 or to call someone to let you know if you've fallen or need help. And then there, of course, are all the socializing apps. We've all learned about Facebook and Zoom and Skype these days because being isolated and at home, we've had to interact with people. And then this idea of creating regular routines where we do things on a regular basis, and it reminds us to do these things. They did demonstrate sort of a lower intensity exercise routine. They called it chair yoga. And for those of you that like to eat while you exercise, you might want to explore the chair yogurt routine. That's actually healthy with probiotics and getting exercise. Personally, I tend to go with the Cinnabons of Steel. That's my approach, but we're all different, so we can do what works for us. Then they talked about leisure time and how important leisure time is, and I couldn't agree more. They quoted Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "For every minute you are angry, you lose 60 seconds of happiness." And so sometimes the leisure time helps us to battle that aggression and sort of that frustration when you feel. I love that quote. But also I want you to think about this, which will tie into my presentation just a little bit later. Whenever we lose a minute for anything, whether it's inattention or whether it's through anger or some other unhealthy approach to things, when we lose a minute, we don't get that minute back. And I think we always need to be aware of that, to pay attention to our time and be focused on the moment. They also talked about how we can get humor for Alexa. Well, this really was something pertinent for me. I actually did my graduate research on humor. I studied humor. And one of my favorite benefits of humor is that it changes your perspective. What actually happens is the neural pathways in your brain change when you use humor, because what humor does is kind of set you up to see things one way and then changes directions and causes you to see it another way. So what it's doing in our brains is changing our perspective and changing the way we see things, which is very healthy because sometimes we can get locked into one way of seeing things. So I thought I'd give you a couple of examples of some humor to show how it changes our perspective. One day, this woman walked into her kitchen and her husband was staring at the orange juice. And she said, "Why are you doing that?" And he said, "Because it says concentrate." There's another one. There was a man who was attending a conference and he had kind of a tickle in his throat. He just kept coughing and it was getting very annoying. Over the day, he just kept coughing and coughing. So finally, at one of the breaks, one of the other attendees walked up to him and said, "You know, I can help with that cough." And the man said, "Oh, great. What should I do?" He said, "Well, when you get home tonight, I want you to eat an entire box of X-Lax." And the man with the cough said, "Well, how is that going to cure my cough?" And he said, "Oh, it won't cure your cough, but tomorrow you'll be afraid to cough." So this is how humor changes our perspective. It makes us see things from another angle, and that's very beneficial. So all the technology in that first session, those technology tips were just fantastic in my mind. It really started the week off great. Then we got to hear from former Governor Marty Schreiber. I don't know about you, but when I see somebody who has been in a pretty high level position as the governor of a large state, has a lot of authority and a lot of power and esteem, talk about something so personal as his wife's battle with Alzheimer's. I think that's one of those moments that we experience that's really hard to match. It really was extraordinary. One of the things that he did was to remind us that we cannot do this alone. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later in my presentation, but I really want to emphasize this as much as I can. We need to ask for help. We are not in this world alone in any way. We are people out there that are willing to help. As a matter of fact, when you ask someone to help you with something, you are giving them the gift to be able to provide their assistance, because it is a gift when we can help one another. All through my career, I've never done things alone. I'm in a business where I work out of my home. I travel around the country and speak. I'm in a business that's kind of isolated. I'm by myself and often away from home. And so I need those connections with other people. And all through my career, every time I did something that was new or that I didn't have the skills for, I found someone that was more skilled than me and I asked for their help. So I think we need to do that. Then Governor Schreiber told the joke about the person who called 911. And when the dispatcher wanted to know where they were, he said he was on Pistachio Street, and the dispatcher wanted him to spell pistachio, and he couldn't do that. So he moved the patient over to Elm Street. Well, let me tell you something. Just for the record, I am an EMT. I am now a newly certified EMT, and I hope no one ever asks you when you call 911 to spell where you are. That's just totally inappropriate. And let me just say, if they were to ask you how to spell CPR, you need to hang up and call somebody else. Just saying, just saying. Now, one of the most powerful things that the governor said was, let go of the person who once was and embrace the person who now is. That is so profound. That is so profound. And I would suggest that applies to us as well. We need to quit hanging on to who we might have been, who we were, and really embrace who we are in this moment now. And perhaps we need to improve on some things. Perhaps we have improved on things and we need to appreciate that, but not hold on to what was. He suggested that we join their world, join these folks' world and not battle with them so much. And this really caught my ear. He said, what's wrong with having a glass of wine at 9:30 in the morning? That really perked me up. I was alert at that point because ever since this whole COVID thing, there is nothing wrong with having a glass of wine at 9:30 in the morning. All right, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Never before 10, okay? Not before 10. Then the governor said we should grab moments of joy and hold them. So rather than worrying about when the storm will pass, we must learn to dance in the rain. Such an insight that we are put in a situation and this is where we are. And when we can embrace where we are and truly be there, it can totally change our experience. I remember the Shakespeare quote that says, nothing is either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. In other words, no situation is inherently good or bad, but it is our way of seeing it that creates that sense of good and bad for us. He reminded us that to be caregivers, we must take care of ourselves. And that's probably the theme of this entire conference, is that we really do need to care for ourselves. You cannot care for someone else until you take care of yourself. And it's a universal principle. And those of us that have been professionals in the caregiving world understand this completely. So I loved Governor Schreiber's program. I thought he was a delightful person and totally engaging. It was such a great thing to have him part of the conference. And then we heard from Anna Nelson, who talked about Alzheimer's and dementia research. She gave really great information from the International Alzheimer's Research Conference. And sometimes I think when we're on the front lines, we're either personal or professional caregivers, we forget all of this work that is going on behind the scenes on our behalf. There are people out there that have sacrificed their entire lives to try to make our lives better by improving on the care and treatment of these diseases. So that's kind of an amazing thing to think about. One study she referenced was about the possibility that reducing systolic blood pressure could reduce the risks of Alzheimer's and dementia. Now, let me just say this. If high blood pressure leads to dementia, this recent election has done us all in. Just saying. She also pointed out that we can take positive steps now to protect our own health. I think this is something we all need to truly embrace, that the healthier we are in our daily routine, the better we will be able to cope with things. Now, that doesn't mean that things won't happen. I mean, I can't determine whether I get dementia or cancer or some other disease, but I can take care of myself to possibly ward that off. My mother was 94 years old when she died. 2 days before she died, she was on her Kindle reading a book and then posting things on her Facebook page 2 days before she died. And that's amazing. She was sharp, all the way till the day she died. But the reason we think she was that her entire life was spent doing things like crossword puzzles and reading books and socializing. She was really a people person. And we think that helped keep her not only sharp, but young at heart in the way that she approached her world. Another fascinating bit of information that Anna shared was that the flu vaccines might actually have an impact on preventing Alzheimer's. That's something I did not know. And she emphasized that boosting our immune system is important for many areas of our health. And that's kind of what I was just saying. Finally, she shared that genetics plays a big role in Alzheimer's care. Of course, genetics plays a big role in just about everything, doesn't it? In fact, every single day, I feel like I'm turning into my father. Anybody else? Anybody else feel like that? I'm so afraid that one day I'm going to walk outside my house and go, "You kids, get out of my yard." Can you relate? So then on day 3, we had Dr. Unyike, who from Johns Hopkins, who talked about Alzheimer's, the clinical approach to Alzheimer's. I don't know about you, but I found him to be both charming, engaging, and so smart. And his presentation was particularly interesting to me because I was pre-med, but did not get into medical school. I did not have the grades to even apply. I was pre-med as an undergraduate. I was also a psychology major, and I was a drama minor. My father used to tell all of his friends, "Yeah, he's pre-med with a drama minor. I guess that means if he doesn't get into med school, he can be on General Hospital." As many physicians do, Dr. Unyike, he talked about how he disclosed that he has no biases in his presentation. Physicians are kind of required to do this. They can't have a bias towards a particular medication or a sort of treatment approach. So he did his disclosure in the beginning saying he wasn't biased. If I had to do a disclosure statement, I'd probably say I do have a bias. These are my opinions, not necessarily based in medical science. These are just my opinions. Please know that. Dr. Unyike also discussed areas of prevention that include socializing, exercising, diet, and sleep. I mentioned this earlier, that we cannot control what happens to us, but we have certain control over what we do to respond. There's some wonderful resources out there. If you've ever read the book Blue Zones, that talks about areas around the world where people live past the age of 100, where they have a high concentration of people over the age of 100. When you look at the lifestyle of those people, there are certain trends, certain patterns of what they do. It's amazing. And he also talked about brain stimulation research, getting the brain to use different pathways when other pathways fail. I think this is fascinating. Neuroscience has just grown leaps and bounds in the last 20 or 30 years. We've learned so many things we did not know. And that goes back to what I was saying about humor, that we know that stories and humor engage the brain in a different way and create different pathways that makes us remember information. So that's great to know that in Alzheimer's dementia care, they're doing research in that area. And one type of symptom, though, he did mention of one type of dementia is overeating and roaming. I had not really been aware of that as much, but I will tell you that I was in Las Vegas last year. And I have to admit, I saw a lot of supposedly healthy people doing that kind of behavior in the buffet area, roaming and overeating. And you'll see a lot of that out there. But he gave a great presentation. And then day 4, yesterday, we had a fantastic program by Bridget, Lindsay, and Carol. And these were the nuts and bolts. These are the things that, like, everybody deals with these practical matters when caring for someone with dementia. And they gave such great information coming from the Caregiver at a Glance guidebook. And again, the message that came through loud and clear was to take care of others, take care of ourselves. They started off with this example of the kaleidoscope and how the little pieces of glass in a kaleidoscope, when you turn it, create these different images that change and are unique and different every time. And the idea was that, people that are dealing with the dementia are different, each are different, and whatever's going on in their brain comes out in different ways with different people. But I would just like to say that kaleidoscope metaphor has a great caregiving metaphor as well, or a great caregiving application. When you think about, there's this device that when you turn it, it shows you something totally different. It's all unique. There's no repetition because of the way it's designed. And I think as caregivers, when we look at a situation and we get so caught up in doing things the same way or having the same experience, perhaps when we can see it a little differently, we might find a different solution or a different way to approach it. And that's a brilliant way to approach it, I think. they talked about the importance of knowledge, planning, and well-being as our approach to caregiving. And I'll just say, as an EMT, that fits very closely with the training that I got. When I arrive on a scene of an accident or a scene where someone's injured or ill, one of the things that we get is training. That's the knowledge. We're given training to know what to do. But we also have to make sure that scene safety is in there. Our well-being is taken care of, because if we're injured in the process, we can't care for the patient. And lastly, we have to know how to plan. If we have multiple people, we've got to take care of that. We have to handle it by planning who gets care in what order. They also discussed the value of advanced directives. And I just want to say something about that on a personal level, is that and also about getting regular checkups and regular treatment after your diagnosis. I just want to say on a personal level, I think one of the things that struck me when I worked in hospice care was I encountered a lot of people that did not seek medical help when they had a problem, and then the problem advanced to the point that it couldn't be corrected. I also saw people that did not have advanced directives, or did not have wills, did not have instructions for families, so that when they got terminally ill, their families didn't know how to handle that. So I suggest to you do this. When I was 27 years old, I had an advanced directive because I'd seen it in hospice care. I didn't want to be in that situation, and didn't want to put my family in a situation where they didn't know how to care for me. And when I turned 50 years old, I got a colonoscopy. That's what you're supposed to do. It's preventive. It's about being well. It's about taking care of things before they get out of hand. So as caregivers, I suggest to you that one of the lessons you can learn in a caregiver role is to really be on the on the preventative side of things for yourself. We talked about relating to difficult disorders. So there was a phrase in there I thought was great, is to step back from difficult behaviors, and not take them personally. And I think this goes back again to thought processes, that oftentimes a difficult situation becomes difficult because how we see it or how we read into it. In and of itself, it's whatever it is. But we can make it worse by the way we interpret it. And then quality time gets better if someone else is providing care. Someone said that yesterday about how sometimes when we finally make that move into a facility that is able to care for our loved one, we have more quality time with them. And I believe that is so true. And I think that goes back to this idea that sometimes this is like a puzzle in many ways. We have to figure out how to do things and adjust a little differently. And sometimes we're not aware of how to do that. We have to figure it out. Let me give you a kind of a mundane example, is that I have certain emails that I have to send out to people that I serve on a regular basis. And I got tired of typing it every time. So I created these little macros where I can just type in a few letters, and it automatically populates my email with the whole email. And then I can adjust it to personalize it how I want to, but I'm not typing the whole thing every time. I'm saving time by creating this little shortcut. I've always felt like life and work are puzzles. They're not going to beat me. I'm not going to give into it. I'm going to figure out how to adjust or how to pivot. Like with this virtual program, they pivoted because that was the option that they had available to them. They don't give in to the situation. They pivot and create a different format and a different way of delivery. And that's what we do in all these challenging situations. And then they talked about home safety. And I love this keep it lit, keep it clear, and keep things in reach for folks who are dealing with dementia. And I just want to make sure that you're clear on this. They didn't say for you to keep lit. You're not supposed to keep lit. That goes back to that whole 9:30 in the morning glass of wine. But just want to make sure we're clear about that. And then they discussed driving privileges, which I think is always tough, some medication issues, and the effects of COVID on allowing people to gather in daycare centers and other facilities. And then they covered some of the local resources that are available to people. I think the summary, I would say, of this panel was to keep looking for the little joys. And so that's kind of my take on the conference. And I hope that was a nice summary for you to kind of wrap it all up. And I think it really sets me up nicely to go into the material I'd like to share with you today. My program is called The Presence of Mind to Grow with the Flow, making the most of every situation. And I think what that really means is just really this idea of how we are present in the world that we're in, and not trying to escape it, not trying to avoid it, not trying to deny it, but really to embrace where we are in this moment and make the most of each moment. So I'm going to cover some areas that I think perhaps will enhance your life and enhance your work, I hope. That's my goal. My goal is to share with you some ways to just think a little differently, just to turn your head. I probably mentioned this before, but I call it the dog whistle effect. You know, when you blow a dog whistle, a dog goes like this. Amazing if we could go through life like that. Something happens, and rather than just reacting, we kind of go, how might I respond or react or see this a little bit differently? Now, first and foremost, what I want to share with you is that caregivers, both professional and personal, are given a great gift. And that great gift, in my opinion, is the ability to understand that our time on this planet is limited. When I worked in hospice care, one of the greatest gifts I was given was to understand that our lives will end at some point, and that we are in this world to be and to do something, because we do not know what tomorrow will bring. We know that one day we will die. We don't know when, where, or how. I used to have a button in my office that said, "Live each day as if it were your last," because one day you'll be right? And so I think we sometimes need a little encouragement to embrace that concept, not because it's morbid, not because it's depressing, because it keeps us focused on the act of living. That's what this is all about. So I want to share something that I did recently, because it was something that happened to me that kind of jogged me awake, if you will. You would think that as a hospice social worker, I was very aware of mortality and the brevity of our lives, if you will, but I get caught in the same routines as everybody else. I get busy, I don't pay attention, and neglect some things. And so I used to go to church up at Vienna Presbyterian Church in Northern Virginia. We live in Central Virginia now, but I went to church at Northern Virginia, Vienna Presbyterian, and just like most churches, every Sunday, the pastor would get up and read through a list of people who needed prayers. They could be ill, or they could be having surgery, or they could be grieving, or whatever. And about 5 times over a 2-year period of time, there were people on that list that I recognized as friends. And I thought to myself, I need to write their name down, and I should either send them a card or visit or give them a call. Now, these were not like my closest friends, but they were friends, and I'd known them for quite a while. So 5 people over 2 years were on my list, and I took them home, put them on my desk, and I need to take care of this. And I didn't. And all 5 of them died before I made any contact with them. And I was distraught by that, because I felt like I had the opportunity to make a real connection, and I didn't take advantage of it. So a few years later, I was just pondering this concept and thinking about how that had all played out. And I started realizing that I need to do something more proactive. First of all, when I put something on a list, don't put it off, just take care of it. But secondly, I need to make sure that people I care about know that I care about them. So I went online, I subscribed to a couple of services where you can create your own greeting cards, and I'll get a couple of hundred of them at a time. And maybe it's a birthday card design or something. I send them to my friends and family. And so I created this card, and here's the card I created. As you can see on the cover of it is a piece of toast. It's a picture of a piece of toast. And then you open it up and it says, "A toast to you." Because that right there is darn clever. Anyway, so if you read the bottom of the card, I printed on every card this: "The older I get, the more I discover that I have not taken the time to tell people how much they mean to me." So that's the purpose of this card. Consider yourself told. And then I took the top part of the card, which was completely blank, and I wrote a personalized message to each person of about 100 people who were friends and family. Now, I did this because I just believed it was something I needed to do to let people know how I cared about them. The response I got was overwhelming. I had one man who emailed me and said the card made him cry. My kindergarten teacher, who was 92 at the time and my mother's best friend, wrote me this long letter. And in that letter, she said that card had been the nicest card she had received in her whole life. And a friend from college called me and said he felt that if I had sent a card out there like that, that I must be terminally ill. So he was just checking on me. But here's the thing. I never did this to get stuff back from people, and I got way more back than I believe I gave people. But I made the connection. And I think this is what our lives are about, is that we don't want to miss this moment, this opportunity to connect with people. I know those of you that are personal caregivers, you may at some point be feeling, oh, I've missed this opportunity with the person I'm caring for. Perhaps they're at a point where they no longer are able to interact and appreciate that. It's a lesson. We all go through those experiences where we wish we had an opportunity to get back. But what that means is that we then go forward. We take that forward in a way that we then infect and affect other people with that new knowledge. A few years ago, this company named Holstee, and it's Holstee. In the handout that's available for this session, you have a link in the handout to this thing I'm getting ready to share with you. It's called the Holstee Manifesto. Holstee was a company that I believe started out as a retailer selling clothes. And they created this mission statement. They just took their company beliefs and values and they created a mission statement. And just to show you, I believe in this so much, I actually have a big poster of it in my home because I found it to be so powerful. And I'm just going to read this quickly to you, what they say. It's not like a sentence. It's just their values that they believed were important for the operation of their company. And this became so viral that they then pivoted their company, and now they create inspirational materials to help people make the most of each day. But this is their value statement, the Holstee Manifesto. This is your life. Do what you love and do it often. And if you don't like something, change it. If you don't like your job, quit. If you don't have enough time, stop watching TV. If you're looking for the love of your life, stop. They will be waiting for you when you start doing things you love. Stop overanalyzing. Life is simple. All emotions are beautiful when you eat. All emotions are beautiful. When you eat, appreciate every last bite. Open your mind, arms, and heart to new things and people. We are united in our differences. Ask the next person you see what their passion is and share your inspiring dream with them. Travel often. Getting lost will help you find yourself. Some opportunities only come once. Seize them. Life is about the people you meet and the things you create with them. So go out and start creating. Live your dream and share your passion. Life is short. Isn't that amazing? I'm amazed that a group of people in a corporate or business environment came up with that concept and said, this is what we believe. So as we go into the rest of this program, that's it, man. That's what I believe. That's what I think it's all about. And no matter how bad things get with things like this virus and isolation and quarantine, no matter how bad things like, when we embrace concepts like that, we make the most of what we have. I asked somebody one time recently, do you think this is the best season of your life? And they looked at me like I was crazy. And yet I think every day could be, depending on how we go into it. So let me talk a little bit about this presence, this power of presence, because I believe this concept of presence of mind to grow with the flow is really about, are you being present? And I would suggest that most of us are not present in the moment most of the time. Our minds are somewhere else. And I think on top of that, we go into situations often with expectations that color our experience. We go in with expectations that aren't helpful to us. So I'll give you an example of this. My wife and I are very different this way. My wife I would call a pessimist. My wife tends to expect the worst and then is happily surprised when the worst doesn't happen. That's kind of her approach. We've known this since we were in college. I tend to be one of those people where I expect everything's going to be okay unless something tells me otherwise. So you can see we approach things a little bit differently. And we discovered this in college. My wife and I went to the University of Virginia, which is just up the road from where we live now. And we met our first year in college. We were in the same dorm. My wife and I were in the same dorm. And when we met out on the balcony of our dorm in the first couple of days of college. And I was wearing bibbed overalls with no shirt on. See, I grew up in Southwestern Virginia in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains. That's what we wore. Not all the time, but for special occasions. So my wife's from Long Island, and to this day, I'm surprised she even talked to me. But anyway, we met that first day and we got to know each other and we started dating. And we realized very early on that things were different. Now, my wife was an engineer. She was an engineer at the University of Virginia. I was in liberal arts. which makes it sound like I paint pictures of Democrats. Actually, liberal arts really means you're in training for graduate school, most cases, you know. But anyway, so my wife was an engineer, and here's what would happen when we take an exam. My wife would go take an exam, and if I saw her later in the day, she would just be distraught. She would be so bummed out. She'd be like walking around like this, and I'm like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And she said, "Well, I know I failed that exam. I know I did. I know which questions I missed. There's no way I could pass it, missing those questions. I know I failed it." And for 2 or 3 days, she would just walk around with a cloud over her head, just depressed. And then, you know, back then when we were in school, they would post the grades on the professor's door, and they would post them by grade. So your name would be listed by grade right there on the professor's door. No HIPAA back then, no confidentiality. And so my wife would go back to the professor's door, and she'd look at the door, and her name would be there at the top of the list. She would not only have had the highest grade in the class, they would have set the curve based on her grade. In 4 years of engineering at the University of Virginia, my wife got 2 A-minuses, and that was the lowest grade she got. I, on the other hand, I did things a little differently. If I went to take an exam and she saw me later in the day and said, "Hey, how was the exam?" I'd go, "Oh, I aced it. I killed that exam. Oh my gosh, that was so easy. That was the easiest exam. I know it was easy. I was the first one to leave." And then for 2 or 3 days, I am on cloud 9, knowing that you can party all week, start studying the night before, and still ace an exam. I'd go back to the professor's office. I'd look at the door of the professor's office. Again, the grades would be listed by grade. And I'd start going down the list, and I'd be like, and then way down on the bottom, there'd be my name with a little phrase next to it. It'd say, "Please see me." Nothing good ever happens after "please see me." Now, see, here's what I think is fascinating about our approaches. Neither one of our approaches were based in reality. They were based in our head. The reality was different than what we both had expected from the situation. And I think this is how we all deal with things. We go into situations with different expectations, and that colors our experience. But when we go in with no expectations and we embrace whatever life gives us, we have the opportunity to respond truly to the reality in that moment. That's extraordinary. That really is an extraordinary gift to be able to do that. It's not easy. It's hard to do. See, I think if you want to break it down into how we approach life, I think there's 3 categories of what we do. I call it skepticism, cynicism, and pessimism. That's how most of us go through life. Now, let me break each one of these down because they're slightly different. Skepticism is when we question things. We question everything. Now, skepticism actually is one of those things that is very helpful in humor. A lot of humor comes from questioning things. When you go, "Oh, I just saw that. That's weird. What's weird about that?" It then leads to the idea of humor. Skepticism, it can be very healthy when we question things. We question things that we see. Like, for instance, here's a thing we question. Why do we drive on a parkway but park in a driveway? Questioning things. Why is it called the toothbrush when we clean multiple teeth with it? Question. So it can actually lead to some things they're probably healthy ways of looking at things. The problem is we don't want to stay in that place and just constantly question things, because then it can lead to a negative approach or negative behavior. Now, I'm going to share a story with you that I'm going to carry through each one of these as an example to show you how this approach would be. So a few years ago, I was in a hotel in Colorado, and I went to take my shower in the morning before a presentation, and I got the soap, the little container of soap, and I opened the soap, and I pulled out this soap, and it was like a little circular bar of soap, but the middle was gone. It hadn't been used. It was actually made that way. It was soap without the middle. And I just thought, this is the oddest thing I've ever seen. I'm like, how did this happen? I mean, did the chief financial officer of the hotel sit down with a committee and go, we've been losing money lately, and we think it's the soap. And if you ever notice soap, when people use it, all that's left is the little middle. So maybe we take the middle out and we save money on the soap. And I thought, that's ridiculous. Like how? So I start questioning it. This is ridiculous. Why does this happen this way? Now, it turns out that there apparently is an ergonomic benefit to soap with a hole in the middle. It's easier to pick up. I don't know who is struggling with the weight of a piece of soap, but that's the purpose of it. And it's actually something that's done out there in some places. But skepticism is questioning. Now, the next one of these is cynicism. Cynicism is more of a distrust. So questioning is just asking, why is this happening? A distrust is where we literally don't trust somebody or trust some system. Cynicism is about distrust. So I'll give you an example about that. My in-laws a few years ago for Christmas gave us a cruise. So we got to go on a cruise, the whole family. And so we are coming back from the cruise on New Year's Eve. And we arrive back in Miami and we go to the airport. Our flight is at 9 o'clock. We get to the airport at 7:30 that morning. And I go to check in at one of the kiosks and it says your flight has left. So being the arrogant person that I can sometimes be, I went up to the ticket agent and I said, your kiosk is broken. And she looked at my ticket and said, no, your flight has left. And what had happened was, the flight had changed its takeoff time, but we never got notified. It had been bumped up about 2 hours. So we missed our flight. Had to drive 18 hours home because there were no other flights to be had. But see, so cynicism was my approach, where I distrusted that they knew what they were doing because I obviously knew what I was doing, right? That's distrust. Give you another example. So like somebody cuts you off in traffic, our reaction is often to immediately assume they did it on purpose. They've been waiting there all day just to cut us off, right? No, that's crazy. That's not how things happen. That's not what happens. Look at the political system. Republicans distrust Democrats. Democrats distrust Republicans. Right from the get-go, they automatically distrust the other. All right, so this is not a healthy way to go through life. I tend to think we are better off giving people the benefit of the doubt rather than distrusting them. So then go back to the soap example. If I think about the soap example from a cynical perspective, I'm thinking those hotels are constantly trying to get the most money out of us that they can by giving us less for our money, right? That's the cynical, distrustful approach. Lastly, of these three approaches is the pessimistic approach. And this is probably the most dangerous in the sense that it puts us in a bad place. The pessimistic approach is where we always see the worst. We always anticipate the worst. We always see that whatever situation is, it's bad. I was on a flight from Charlotte, North Carolina to Charlottesville, Virginia, and I got on the plane. And before we even took off, the woman sitting next to me 3 times told me how much she hated that airport. No other conversation, really. She just had to tell me how much she hated the airport. That's a pessimistic approach. That's not helpful to me, probably not helpful to her. One of the ways I heard this described was every silver lining has a cloud, right? That's a pessimistic approach. You go to the grocery store and you say, I always get the slowest line, right? You go to a mall and you say, I never get the parking lot during this next to the door, right? That's a pessimistic approach. And this is not helpful to me. So I look at the soap example that I had that time, and I look at the soap, and a pessimistic approach to the soap is I always get the least amount of soap, right? That's how we do. And so these are the different ways that we go into situations. And I bet if you analyze or think back about how you've approached things, you can see that you've gone into situations sometimes with this approach. Well, I have a fourth example for you that I think is what changed my life, really. It's called the is-ism approach. The is-ism approach. And basically what the is-ism approach is to say, this is what it is. Now, I know that's a cliche phrase, and I'm not looking at it that way. I'm looking at it from the perspective of whatever situation we're in is where we are. No more, no less. We don't read more into it. We don't read less into it. It is what it is. And so when we go into a situation and we're in a line that's slow in the grocery store, we simply note to ourselves, I'm in a line that's going slowly. Don't read more into it to that. It's not happening to you. It's not personal. We're not victims to this. It's just what it is. You get a parking lot spot, you can't find a parking lot spot near the door. You have options. You either take one farther away or you keep circling looking for a closer one. That's what it is. It is just that. It doesn't have to be that it was happening to us personally. And I think that's where we can step back and make the most of every moment. And I think when yesterday they talked about this, when not to take personally the behaviors of folks that we're caring for. It is not personal. It's a part of the disease. And the more we can disassociate that from taking it on ourselves, the less stress we will feel. And so go back to the soap example. What did I actually do? I got this soap with the hole in the middle and I went, that's interesting. Look what I got, soap with the hole in the middle. What am I going to do with this? So I went to my presentation a little bit later in the morning and I walked up on stage and I said to people, how many of you stayed in the hotel last night? And probably 90% of them did. And I said, well, I almost was late to my presentation this morning because I was stuck in Lost and Found trying to find the center of my soap. And the whole place erupted because they had all had the same soap. And so instead of getting defensive, I mean, that's a minor thing, obviously, but instead of getting caught up in it, I went with it because that's what I was given. You know, one of the books that had the greatest impact on me in the way that I see the world these days is this book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. This is in your bibliography that's on your handout. Eckhart Tolle wrote a book about being present, about really being aware and being in the moment rather than being in our head. Our head wants to take us in a variety of different situations, but when we're in the moment, we can be present. And this is what mindfulness is. And so I've been reading about mindfulness for a number of years now. And when I first started reading about it, one of the things I read was that when you do something, if you can only do that thing, you're going to be more focused rather than trying to multitask. Now, one of the things they talk about is if you go out on a walk, just walk. Don't listen to music. Don't listen to podcasts. Just walk. And so, so I thought, well, that's a good idea. So I tried this. Now we live in the country. I live in the mountains. I'm surrounded by woods. So I went out on a walk one day and I said, I'm just going to walk. I'm just going to take in everything on the walk. That's being present, right? And so I'm walking up the road. And at one point I heard a noise off to my left and I turned around and looked. And just at the edge of the woods, about 20 feet from me, were 10 deer. And they were all just doing this. And we stood there for about 20 seconds, just staring at each other. And then one of them snorted and everybody ran off. But it was an amazing moment. If I'd been listening to something, I wouldn't have heard the noise. I wouldn't have turned and see them. You see how this works is that we miss things. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually ask you to do some activity here. Here's what I want you to do. And I'm going to monitor this. I'm assuming most of you are somewhere near a window. And what I want you to do is I want you to look out the window and I want you just to look and see what you see. Now, I don't want you to say, oh, I see a tree. That's too easy. That's a label. That's not really what you're seeing. I want you to tell me just one sentence in the chat. I want you to write down one sentence, what you actually see. Don't tell me everything because we don't have a room in the chat for that. But I just want you to look out the window and go, what do I actually see? Whether the colors or the shapes or the textures or the movement, just give me an example of what you see. All right. And so I'm seeing some things here, cars. All right. But when you think about the car, what color is the car? What texture is the car? What shape is the car? Colors, what colors? Green, orange, yellow, blue, not blue, maybe, maybe the car. Yeah. Bright blue car, red flower, coolness and refreshment. But describe what causes that coolness and refreshment. What is it that is actually making that happen? That's when we're seeing into the reality of the moment. You see? One time we were sitting at dinner and my son, I was telling him, I said, you know, a tree is a tree because we give it that name. A tree is more than that. There are leaves and there are branches and there's a trunk and there's colors and there's textures and movement when the wind blows. And so a tree is not just a tree. And our middle school son looked at us and says, what are you talking about? Yeah, but I see they keep coming. You can see. And when you start doing this more, you start seeing more. Now, stop that exercise and I want you to switch gears. Now what I want you to do is I want you to pay attention to what your head is telling you. What is your mind telling you in this moment? What are your thoughts about this moment? Some of you are maybe saying, when is this going to be over? What do I have to do this afternoon? I'm distracted by something over here in this room. I've got text messages or emails that are coming through. What is your mind saying that's taking you out of that moment of observing and seeing? Write one sentence or a few words about what is your mind telling you right now? What thoughts are coming through? I'm hungry. Perfect. That's a great distraction for us. When we're quiet, it distracts us from the moment. The leaves are wet and might be slippery, right? They're going so fast I can't see them. I want to be outside and enjoy the weather. Perfect. That's a great example because then what's that saying is you don't want to be here potentially. And see, this is what Eckhart Tolle described to us and said, when we're here but want to be somewhere else, that's where stress comes from. And so when we realize that stress, a lot of it comes from what we're thinking, it leads us away. The last one is I'm just looking at right now is probably the best, because this is where we all live. I have so much work to do. When our mind is telling us over and over and over, I have so much work to do, we are not present in this moment. We're present in our mind. And those moments are going by where we're not fully experiencing where we are. And then our mind becomes control over what we're actually doing. And if you're sitting there distracted by all the things in your mind, for one, you're missing a good presentation, just saying. but you're also missing that moment, like I talked about before, and you don't get that moment back. Do you remember the movie It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart? Jimmy Stewart was this wonderful character, George Bailey, who lived, and we're coming up on the holiday season. You'll see this on TV a lot. You may have recordings of it, but it's one of my favorite movies. He lived in this town, Bedford Falls, and he was this great, caring individual. And they were going to shut down the bank, and he took it over because he knew that the people in that town needed the bank. But his dream, his life dream, was to go travel the world. He did not want to be tied to this little town. So throughout the whole movie, he keeps trying to go out of town, to leave, and he can't, because something brings him back every time where he has to care for somebody else. And at the end of the movie, what we realized was that he had made everyone's life better in that town because he was willing to do that, and he never made the connection. He didn't realize he was doing it. That's an extraordinary gift. But that's what I think happens, is his mind the whole time was telling him, let's get out of here, rather than being comfortable in the role that he was in, which was so valuable, important, and probably once he made the connection, much more fulfilling to him than traveling ever would have been. But see, we sometimes don't pay attention to that. I'll give you a personal example myself. Before COVID, I was traveling a lot, and I was in Traverse City, Michigan a couple of years ago. And my method used to be, when I traveled, I would ask the concierge in the hotel to recommend a restaurant, and I'd go sit at the restaurant, sit at a table, have dinner, and come back to my hotel. Or I'd get room service when it was time for dinner. And then so somebody told me something different, and it really made an impact on me. So what I started doing was I would ask the concierge for breweries or bars, because a lot of times they had happy hours. And I would go to the bar and sit there and eat discounted food for the happy hour, but I would have a conversation with the bartender or whoever might just randomly sit next to me. And what I found is that I had much more interesting interactions with people by doing that than just sitting in a booth in the restaurant or sitting at a table in the restaurant. One time I was in the middle of nowhere, Idaho, and I was at a brewery having dinner, and a man sat down next to me. And after a few minutes, we started talking. And it turns out he had been a roadie for the Grateful Dead. And this man was amazing. The stories he had were extraordinary. And I got to spend like 2 hours talking about the Grateful Dead with this guy. So I started doing that, and it really changed things. And so I was in Traverse City, Michigan, and I was in a hotel that had a pretty rinky-dink bar and restaurant. It really wasn't that great. Wasn't looking forward to go down there, because the times I'd been down there, there might have been one other person in the whole thing. And the bartender didn't even stay there. They would come and go because they were also the person serving food. So they wouldn't be there for stretches of time. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just get room service. I said, no, you need to get out of the room. So I left the room, went down, sat at the bar, ordered a hamburger, and waited for my dinner. And a gentleman sat down next to me. And we started talking. And I said, oh, what are you doing here? And he said, well, he was a salesman that sold large equipment to municipalities, to cities and towns all over the country, like, dump trucks and front end loaders. And he was there for a conference that was about that. And I said, oh, that's interesting. And he said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm here at a healthcare conference, and I used to be a hospice social worker. Now I speak a lot. And so I'm here for a conference as a speaker. And he looked at me and he said, oh, I know about hospice. He said, we used hospice for my father and my son. Now, if you're like me, the first thing you think about is, I can understand it for the father. This guy looked like he was about 40, but I wonder what happened to the son. So being a hospice social worker, I don't have any hesitation in these kind of environments to ask questions. And so I said to him, what happened to your son? And he went on to explain that 2 years earlier, his son had died of a glioblastoma, a brain tumor, and that he was still struggling with it. He was still having a hard time dealing with it and was having trouble moving on. And so we had a long conversation. And as a social worker, I knew some of the resources that were probably in his community and suggested he try a few things. And he was very, very grateful. And we left that conversation, and I'm going back to my room, and I said, I almost missed that. I almost missed that opportunity because my expectation or the way that I was going into that situation was coloring what actually happened. I just thought it wasn't going to be enjoyable. And it was so fulfilling to have that contact with that guy. But even more important for me in that moment was that 2 months prior to that, my brother-in-law had been diagnosed with a glioblastoma. And the whole reason I got into hospice in the first place was back in 1985, my 7-year-old nephew died of a brain tumor. So that conversation with that man not only was an opportunity for me as a hospice person to share some insights, but it touched me personally because I was going through a similar situation with my brother-in-law and had been through a situation with my brother's son. That's what happens when we're in the moment, when we take what the world gives us and figure out how to then respond to it. So that's about being present. That's really about being present in the moment. Now, I want to just touch on very briefly one quick thing about this concept based on my book, Do It Well, Make It Fun. I wrote a book in 2012 called Do It Well, Make It Fun. And it's really about how do we take the things we have to do and either get better at them or make them more fun. So the simple example that I always give people is if you ever had a boss that was really good at what he or she did, but was fun to be around, you didn't really mind going to work. You respect them because they're good at what they do, but you enjoy them because they're fun. So this idea of do it well, make it fun is a two-part concept of do the best you can and make the experience fun. So let me illustrate what that looks like, because as caregivers, either professional or personal, we encounter things that we have to do on a regular basis, and sometimes they drag us down because they're stressful or mundane or challenging. And when we look at it, like I said earlier, like a puzzle, and we think, okay, how can I do this differently? Sometimes we find some solutions that make things a little easier. So I'll give you an example of the first one. The first one is that I don't know how many of you have ever served on a church committee, but the first church committee I ever served on, I came home to my wife a little bit later and I said, those can't be Christians. It was the most contentious group of people I'd ever worked with. They were arguing about everything. But I'm good at being on committees, and I thought, okay, I can handle this. And I got into it and enjoyed the process. But when you're good at being on a committee, you get asked to be on a committee. So I, again, at Vienna Presbyterian Church, I was asked to be a deacon. And a deacon, it's a 3-year term. And the deacons are the social workers in that church. We visit people in the hospital. We send out cards, send flowers. And so I signed up to do that. Go to my first meeting. It's on a Monday night. I've gone to work all day. The meeting starts at 7:30 that night. It doesn't end until 10:30 that night. A 3-hour meeting. I don't mind a long meeting if you're getting stuff done. The problem was we were having conversations like, where should we put the greeting cards? Should they be over here or should we put them over here? And 3 hours of that. And I came home and told my wife, I can't take 3 years of that kind of discussion. So I came back to the next meeting and I said to the chairperson, put me on the agenda. I have a proposal. And so he put me on the agenda. We got to that point in the agenda and he said, what's your proposal? I said, here's my proposal. If you can end this meeting in less than an hour, just once, I will dress like Vanna White and bring you a dozen roses. Now I had been in a talent show, so I had the outfit, all right? Well, these people looked at me like I was crazy. They had never seen this kind of meeting tactic. And then they became possessed with getting this meeting over in less than an hour because they wanted to see this play out. So that meeting over the next 6 months went from 3 hours to 2.5 to 2 to an hour and a half. The closest it ever got was an hour and 5 minutes. Because if it looked like it was going to be close, I'd just throw out something controversial. I'm no idiot. I don't mind dressing like Vanna White, but I am not paying for flowers just to get a meeting to end early, right? Well, anyway, what happened is that in the process of realizing we weren't managing our time well, our meetings got shorter to the point that they on average after that were an hour and a half, just because we did it better. We realized it was a skill we needed. Do it well, make it fun. So what does the make it fun part look like? Make it fun part, make the process more interesting. I was in a sandwich shop not too long ago and it was very busy, and the woman that was taking the orders, you could tell she was a little bit scattered because it was just so busy. She was very polite. She was not rude, but you could tell she was trying to keep up. So the routine was you'd give your order and she'd say, could I have a name for the order? And then she'd take the order and they'd fill it in the back. So I got up there, I gave her my order. She said, can I have a name for the order? And I went, handsome. And she burst out laughing, which hurt my feelings. I'm just saying. But then she kind of chuckled, and I chuckled too. Now that was in and of itself enough for me. Had no idea that the best part of that whole experience was about 10 minutes later, when from behind the counter she yells, "I got an order for handsome here." So from the back of the restaurant, I was like, "That's me. That's me." Now I do it all the time. Anytime anybody asks me for my name for an order, always handsome. It just makes the process a little easier. As an EMT the other day, I was taking somebody to the hospital, and we got to the ER, and this woman had come in her nightgown. She had been in bed, and she had hurt her hip, and so we were transferring her from the ER stretcher to the gurney in the hospital. And she was very nervous about her gown. She kept pulling down on it. She didn't want it to ride up on her, and I could tell she was a little uncomfortable. And I said, "Hey, don't worry about it. It covers more than Medicare." And she burst out laughing. And in that moment, you could just see this instant relaxation. So we got to be good at what we do to use humor. But when we use humor and fun as the way we do things, it just comes together and makes a magic combination. Do it well, make it fun. Now, very briefly, I want to touch on two more things that are a little bit different, a little bit out of left field, if you will. Two things that I think make our experiences and make our lives richer and give us more sense of balance. The first is about friendships. I was about 30 years old before I realized I did not have any purposeful close friends. And what I mean by that, I had friends, but they were usually friends what I call geographical convenience. They were people from work, they were people from neighborhood, they were family members, maybe just because I was into that, I'm married into that family, or I grew up in that family. They were not purposeful relationships. So I sought to change that. I wanted to have some purposefully sought out good friends. As a friend of mine once said, he said, "I want to have somebody that I can call at 11:30 at night and will help me or support me." And I thought, gosh, I don't have that person. So I developed some friendships over the years. I'll tell you something cool that a group of our friends did one time. I was in a church group where we got together every couple of weeks, and we would study a book or read something, and we got to be really close friends. The guys wanted to do something together. Some of us played golf, but some didn't. And we were trying to figure out a way. And I don't know. Men don't typically, when we were younger, we just don't go out to dinner. The women might do that, but the men didn't want to really do that. So here's what we came up with. We called it JAM, J-A-M, Joint Activities for Men. So here's what we did for a year or two. 6 times during the year, we set aside a Saturday morning where each person in that group, there were 6 of us, each person in that group of men got to have all the other guys come to their house and work on that to-do list that they couldn't get done, like painting a room or putting up cabinets or cleaning the yard, whatever it might be. So once a year, we got 5 other people to come to our house and do whatever we wanted to do. It was extraordinary. And we found that it deepened our relationships. It built a strong bond between us, but it was practical too. There was a great outcome to it. I remember when they came to my house, we painted like 5 or 6 different rooms because our house was getting ready to be on the market. And the house looked fantastic. And it was so much easier than if I'd done it myself. So that's an example of a purposeful relationship with people. You've got to understand you cannot do this alone. And I'm not just talking about those of you that are personal caregivers. I'm talking about everybody. Yeah, you can't do life alone. And sometimes if we're not thinking about the fact that we need to be purposeful about a relationship, then we don't pursue it. And when I say purposeful, I mean, find people that have similar interests and likes and dislikes that you do. Don't just, connect with the person that's convenient. I had to pick people. One of them was an associate pastor in my church. We had so many things in common. We were exactly the same age. We had a relationship together where we would get together for coffee twice a month and just talk about our lives and support each other. We would call each other. Like my father died during that time and he called me. And when his father died, I called him and we had this great relationship. I have my closest friend right now lives in Tampa, Florida. We talk about every 2 weeks on the phone, and we schedule a call once a month so that we don't lose touch with each other. And we consult each other about business and we share things with each other. We're both humorists. We'll say to each other, "Is this funny?" And he'll give me feedback, or I'll give him feedback. There are guys that live near me where I live now that I worked with in a hospital 30 years ago. We've reconnected and we now get together for dinner on a regular basis. These relationships are so important to us because as we get older and we're not working and we're not necessarily as active, the relationships are what are going to sustain us. And that's why I go back to my mother. That's what she did. Her relationships were what carried her to the ripe old age of 94, right? And so there's data on this. I'm going to read this because I don't remember all these bullets, but the Mayo Clinic has showed that friendships and relationships increase your sense of well-being and purpose. They boost your happiness and reduce your stress. They improve self-confidence and the sense of self-worth. They help you cope with trauma or challenge or adversity, whatever you want to call it. And they encourage you to change behaviors that might not be healthy. That's one of the best things my friends do is they'll sometimes call me out on something if it's not healthy or it's not, I'm doing something that they're thinking, I don't know if that's going to be a good thing for you to pursue. That I feel comfortable that they're going to share that with me. And lastly, let me just touch on one more thing. And I know this is probably going to sound really odd because so much of the week has talked about the challenge or the burden of being a caregiver. And so the last thing in the world you're going to want if you're a personal caregiver is more to do. But let me try to convince you about some of the value of this. Volunteering changes our DNA, I think. It changes who we are because it gets us out of ourselves. My dad was a lifelong volunteer. He was in a Rotary Club for 54 years. When I grew up, I constantly saw my mom and dad serving in the community in a variety of different ways. When I got to college at the University of Virginia, I joined a service fraternity, Alpha Phi Omega. We did a service project in our community every single weekend, every single Saturday morning for the entire school year. Now think about what that took to pull off. A group of students getting together and planning, organizing, and pulling off service projects every Saturday morning for a year. It kind of put in me this notion of service and how important service is. I was in the Rotary Club of Herndon for a dozen years, and the motto of Rotary is service above self. And the reason I love that is a lot of times I think what causes us the most angst is the self. It's when we get too caught up in ourselves, we don't see beyond that. But when you go in and serve someone else that is in need, all of a sudden it opens your eyes to this other world that you have the opportunity to help. I'll give you some of the benefits of this. When I was in Herndon, I volunteered for a number of years for the Chamber of Commerce when they did their annual award celebration. And I was the MC one year where they celebrated the history of the state of Virginia. And there were 3 former governors of Virginia at that event. One of them was Doug Wilder, who was the first African-American governor in the country. And because I was the MC, my wife and I got to sit at their table. So we sat at a table with 3 former governors and their spouses, and it was extraordinary. It was just a great opportunity. So the fact that I'd volunteered led to something that actually was something I enjoyed. Currently, I serve as a volunteer EMT, a volunteer ambulance driver, and at my church up the road, we have a wood ministry where we cut wood and deliver it to people who don't have heat. One day, I accompanied somebody in a pickup truck, and we went and dropped off a load of wood at a house in a rural part of our county. And we walked up to the door, and I immediately realized that the owner of the house was hearing impaired. I think he might have been fully deaf, but I'm not sure. I know he's hearing impaired. And when he saw us at the door, he said, "I'm so glad you're here. We have been without heat for 3 days." Now, I don't know about you, but when I'm put in a situation like that, I immediately am grateful that I'm able to help, but I'm also immediately grateful for all the things that I have. Sometimes when we're in challenging situations, it only takes a moment to realize there are other people that are maybe even suffering more than we are. And I think that helps us to cope with what's going on. So I would encourage you to think about what gifts and skills you might have that you could share with others and find a way to maybe just occasionally, maybe it's just an hour a month that you get out of the situation you're in and go serve in another way and see how that replenishes and fills your tank so that you can continue doing what it is you're doing. I think it's an amazing way that we can change our approach. So, we're talking about, understanding we're facing our mortality. We need to understand that we won't be here forever. What are we doing with the time that we have? Are we being present in the moment? Are we balancing things? We're doing better at things and making them fun. Are Are we developing relationships that are important? And are we looking for opportunities where we can get out of our way and serve others and maybe look at our worlds and our lives a little bit differently? There's information in your handout. It's got some links to some videos and things that will supplement this presentation. There's a wonderful bibliography. If you go to our website, you can sign up for our newsletter that goes out every 3 or 4 weeks. It's just a blog basically that we push out. And you can find some resources there that are free that I hopefully can be helpful to you. Somebody one time, you've heard this thing, the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence. Somebody one time said the grass is only as green as we keep it. And I think that's such a bold statement. So I'm going to leave you with my part of the presentation. We'll take some questions in a minute, but I'm going to leave you with this poem by Wu Min, a Chinese poet from the 13th century. He says this: 10,000 flowers in spring, the moon in autumn, a cool breeze in the summer, snow in winter. If your mind isn't clouded by unnecessary things, this is the best season of your life. I hope this has been helpful. I just want to say to you folks that you are the angels in the world. You're the ones out there serving in so many difficult situations. I don't know that I could do it myself. And I'm so grateful that you're there because your care and concern keeps folks in a good place. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of your conference this week.
Thank you, Ron. This has been exciting, and I'll share how it's affected everyone else. We have a question, kind of profound question. What is a tree? What does it mean to you? When I see a tree outside, to me, a tree means life.
Yeah. I think one of the things that has really impacted me on this idea of mindfulness is we live in a world where we give labels to things. So it's a chair, it's a tree, it's grass, it's a car. But let's just take a car, for example. But what is a car? A car is made up of metal and paint and cotton and leather and all these, and rubber on the tires, all these different things. And then if you really want to take this a step further, when you see those things, you can also see all the people that went into making making that car and creating that thing for us. And then it becomes this mode of transportation and this thing that is a resource to us that allows us to get places. So when we're quick to go, it's a car, we sometimes diminish all those other aspects of it, which are so meaningful. So the tree, yes, the tree is life. The tree can also be shade. It can be cool. The tree can be a visual inspiration. There are so many things or ways that it can serve. It can protect us. It's a home for birds and squirrels. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that we don't want to discount just the one-word answers because it's so much more than that. And that's what being present's all about.
Yeah. Someone who was listening to your story about jam said, could we set up a jog group?
What is that?
For women?
Oh, sure. That one escaped me a little bit. I'm not so quick on the trigger, obviously. Oh, yeah. So, I think this is where I go back to this concept of a puzzle. When I took my first job and had my first really stressful day in the job, I went home and I said to myself, I can't live like this. I can't spend all my time being stressed out. So to me, it's a game. So the minute I start getting stressed out, I'm like, all right, how am I going to make this less stressful? And it's not always easy. I don't always have the answers right away, but I work at it. And so, yeah, that's one of those things to me that solved the problem that we couldn't figure out. And it was just a creative way. We came up with it together, but it was a creative way, I think, of addressing the issue. So absolutely, jaw away. See, you've even got a slogan.
I just have to chunk together some of the chat. This is so great. I like this guy, very funny. I love that, brilliant. Ha ha ha. What a great way to end the conference with laughter. I'm laughing out loud and clapping my hands. You're awesome.
I'm so glad. I'm appreciative. Anybody has any questions, type them in the Q&A, or if not, go about your day and be uplifted, hopefully.
Okay. Thank you so much. And there's so much energy bouncing around all our rooms now. Thank you.
I'm so glad. Thank you all so much.
We actually have some door prizes. Ron, if you can grab your books.
Oh yeah.
Okay. It's time for.
Here we go.
All right, there they are. Ron, If Steve is ready to spin his magic wheel with the names of all our attendees today, we're going to give away our first door prize. And this is awesome. This 3-book collection of Ron's books. And that's going to go to, keep your fingers crossed, Christine Everett. Okay.
Congratulations, Christine.
All right.
That's awesome, Christine. I'll sign the book to you. And the fact that it's signed, unfortunately, reduces the value, but we'll get it to you anyway.
Increases the postage, but okay. Let's give away a book from Tuesday's, 3 books actually, from Tuesday's speaker, Governor Martin Schreiber, his book, My Two Elaines. Lindsay's holding up a copy of it. His wonderful book is going to go to Taylor Johnson.
Congratulations, Taylor.
And it's coming to a stop. Dorothy, oh boy. SM, I'll find it. Okay, next one.
While the wheel is spinning, Ron, I wanted to share a comment from the chat. I'm very happy I listened to Ron's presentation. I feel stronger and better prepared for my caregiving and life issues ahead. Many thanks.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Well, keep the faith and just keep working at it.
Gail won a prize. Congratulations, Gail. Let's do one more of Governor Schreiber's books. All right. Okay. And this is going to go to Susan Adams. And Steve, we're going to spend one more time to give out the Caregiving at a Glance wonderful guidebook. Malika, thank you. Malika, congratulations.
Congratulations, Malika, and all of our door prize winners. So Ron, a question popped into the chat as we were spinning the wheel. So if you have a few moments, maybe we can take this one.
Okay.
It says, my mom has dementia since being diagnosed in 2012. She seldom smiles, sometimes looks like she is in pain, and even has a scowl on her face. How can I make her smile?
Yeah, well, that's a tough question. I think one of the things that I learned in listening to the other presentations this week is that the disease itself has different impacts on people. And again, first step is to not take that personally. It's not necessarily directed at us. It's a part of the process. And sometimes, and I know my aunt went through this, that she had a period of time with her dementia where she was just not happy with anything. And she was at some points aggressive, and it was very difficult for her family. But again, we separate the fact that that's the disease process. That's how it affects her. And maybe that's not a reasonable goal. And the other thing I would say is that sometimes the most unexpected things will make people smile. And so if you find something that does make her smile at some point, then I would go back and repeat that again. That's part of the puzzle, is figuring it out. But perhaps with someone with dementia, the common things that might make you and I laugh or smile are not going to work with them. And we just keep letting the opportunity be there, but not be frustrated if it doesn't happen.
It's a real interesting question. How do we figure out how to keep our humor culturally appropriate?
Yeah, all right, I'm gonna probably veer off in a little different direction on this one, because it's kind of weird. We are in a very politically correct society right now. We've gotten to the point where a lot of things are not allowed or not acceptable when it comes to humor or to language. And personally, the world of comedy and humor has always been that safe place where it's where satire occurs. And satire is where we can make fun of things without the risk of people taking them seriously. And it's kind of like our daily routines or who we are or what we see. But we're kind of gotten away from that. I don't know if you know, but Jerry Seinfeld has said he won't perform at college campuses anymore because he doesn't want them to tell him what's appropriate or not. And that's a sad statement, I think, when we go to that point. I have a pastor friend who used to be a pastor in Arlington who said, if you use humor with a sensitive spirit, it will always work, even when it doesn't, because the people can feel your sensitive spirit. And so I've always believed that humor should be intended to bring people together, not push them apart. It doesn't mean that I haven't stumbled occasionally. I have said things that have offended people inadvertently. And I always go back and apologize. I don't want to be the person that's seen as using inappropriate humor. Sometimes I might think it's appropriate, somebody else might not. But I think we just go into it with a sensitive spirit. But we also have to realize we're in a very sensitive time in our history right now, too. There's a lot of tension, and we just have to be aware of that.
Thank you so much, Ron, and thank you, Pat, for helping to moderate some of the Q&A today. So we really appreciate you coming back with us again and again, Ron.
Always,
we
always
can never
a
get
pleasure.
enough.
Always a pleasure.
And I know it's different in the virtual world. Trust me, I was laughing here on the other side of my computer, even though it was, mute and camera off, and I know others were too. So
Grateful for that.
Well, thank you, everyone. So now I'd like to give one more reminder about our virtual exhibit hall for this year's conference. There are over 40 great resources. I mean, we're talking things from the local area agencies on aging in Northern Virginia, VICAP, Project Lifesaver, the Alzheimer's Association, Insight Memory Care Center, home care agencies, assisted livings, all kinds of really cool, unique services and more. So please do venture over to the virtual exhibit hall. That will be open at least through the remainder of November, probably December, maybe even longer, but don't wait, because we know that to-do list keeps building and some of these things start to fall off if we wait too long. So venture over there, surf around, look and see what's available to you. We do want to hear about your full conference experience. We're not putting up a poll question today because we all know that we loved Ron's humor and it was a great way to end our week, but we do want to hear from you, especially as we've moved this conference into the virtual world this year. So please share your feedback. We're going to be putting a link in the chat for a full conference evaluation. It really should only take you about 5 minutes, but it's an opportunity to address how you felt about each session and also to share some ideas about what was most valuable to you, if there were any challenges, and what topics you'd like to hear about next year. Also, if you have any comments about preferring an in-person event or a virtual event next year, everything's still a little in flux for a while. So having your feedback would be helpful to us as well. So let us know, follow that post-conference evaluation link in SurveyMonkey. We'll also be sending out a post-conference email shortly, and that will also have that link. So if you miss it now, you can find that in your email box this afternoon. For professionals, if you'd like to purchase one CEU, which is 10 contact hours for this week's conference, please follow the link that we're going to put in the chat now. This link will also be included in the post-conference email that's going out this afternoon. The CEU is provided by George Mason University for a fee of $50. If you don't need an official CEU, but you do want a general certificate of attendance for this week's conference, we will be including a link to a PDF in our post-conference email. The consortium is not able to verify the attendance for each individual, but it gives you something to show that you are here for your own records. And as we wrap up this year's conference, I want to recognize the physical and emotional effort and energy that it took for all of you to be here with us this week. Learning takes intention, adapting isn't easy, and thriving might feel like a pie in the sky idea. But we're confident that you're leaving this conference with some enlightening information, innovative ideas, and some helpful resources. We hope that this carries you through the holiday season with hope and positivity. Thank you to everyone for joining us for our 34th Annual Caregivers Conference, and we look forward to seeing you again next year for our 35th. Until then, be well, everyone.